Hello, and welcome to TinkerPop's home here on Twitch. Today we have another TinkerPop Wide stream where we explore the wider TinkerPop community, looking at tools, libraries, graph systems built on the TinkerPop framework, or even applications built on those foundations. Today we're going to be talking with folks from JanusGraph. For those who may not be aware, JanusGraph is a scalable graph database optimized for storing and querying graphs containing a lot of vertices and edges, like in the scales of billions across multi-machine clusters. So today we have Bo and Alex, two core contributors to the project, to chat for a bit about the work that's happening in their community. Thank you both for being here today.
Yeah, thank you, Steven, for inviting.
Yeah, thank you, Steven.
Okay, so I think where I'd like to start is with JanusGraph 1.0. I think that was kind of a major milestone for the project that I guess released at the end of the 2023, and I'm kind of wondering how you all are feeling about that.
Actually, pretty good. It was, it was really like a big milestone, and we did like incorporate, I think, a lot of features, pretty cool features in JanusGraph 1.0. Yeah, there are still a lot of features which we plan for later releases, but yeah, I think this one was quite a big release for us.
Yeah, it was quite a milestone. For those who are not familiar with JanusGraph, 1.0.0 sounds like the first major official release, but it's actually not. Since the birth of JanusGraph, which was a fork of TitanGraph, we started from 0.1 and 0.2, 0.3. Every 0.x is a major release. And starting from 0.6, we were discussing whether we should follow this path and do 0.7, 0.8, 0.9 until 1.0. And we figured maybe we should start at 1.0 sooner than later, so that people actually know, okay, it can be used in production. And actually, a lot of companies have been using JanusGraph in production for a very long time, for a few years. So I just wanted to say 1.0 is a major milestone, but it doesn't mean it's the first official release or first production-ready release of JanusGraph.
Yeah, I think maybe that's I think I meant by milestone, there was a kind of finally a decision to like feel comfortable with breaking away from the old versioning model. Yeah, I suppose that folks who may not have been following the project all along have realized just how many releases existed before this, and that it was built on something that already had sort of a 1.0 release, and as a result, but I still think it was still kind of an important step to take, to finally get to like a 1.0 and feel comfortable that it was time to do it.
Mm-hmm. It's true. I do remember a while ago we actually was discussing about when should we move to 1.0 release, but the decision was made that whenever we feel that it is fully production ready, we should move to 1.0. However, we just forgot about it, and I think starting from 0.3 release, it was already production, good for production usage, but we just continued this path of following this versioning and never got to 1.0. And then some point, we just decided that we should do something with it, because a lot of people from the community were asking, like, if it is 0 point something, isn't like, does it mean it's not production ready? And we were telling, yeah, it is production ready. A lot of big companies actually using it in production. You can go ahead and use it, but yeah, it was just confusing for many people that it is 0 point something and not 1 point something.
Right. Yeah. Well, how does JanusGraph deal with older versions? I mean, plenty of those are in production situations right now. What kind of maintenance do you all deal with, and how do you deal with end of life situations for software? Can you speak about that?
Yeah. So basically, in JanusGraph, currently we have kind of an agreement to support two versions. Let's say two minor versions. So currently we do support 0.6 and 1.0 release, but yeah, it's just due to, I guess, lack of interest of supporting older releases. No one really wants to support them, so we just decided that let's support for now two releases, and then yeah, if folks from the community wants to support older releases, we are totally fine. But yeah, generally we don't support older releases.
Yeah, I just want to add on to that. When Alex said we don't support it, it doesn't mean it doesn't work anymore. It just means if you are reporting a bug on an older version, say 0.5, we may not investigate it. We will just we will not backport the fixes to the older branches. So we suggest you upgrading to the new branches. In terms of EOL and upgrading, we try to be backward compatible as much as possible. For example, in the 1.0 release, there's a new feature called finally users can create vertices using their custom string IDs. This is a feature that many graph databases support, like Neptune supports it, but JanusGraph has never supported the feature. You can provide a custom ID, but it has to be it has to be a numeric type. And a lot of customers have eagerly requested this feature, and we finally ship it in 1.0.0. But in order to be backward compatible with the elder versions, we made a lot of efforts. So it's backward compatible, meaning that if you're already using an old version, you can just upgrade it to the latest binary, and it will work just fine. If you want to start using the new feature, it's fine. It's totally backward compatible and front compatible.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, not forward compatible. If you're using a 0.6 binary to read the data written by 1.0, that may not work. But as long as you're not starting, you haven't started using the new feature, then it should the forward compatibility works. But as long as you start using the new string ID, then the old version couldn't read the new data, which is reasonable, I guess. But as long as you don't start using the new feature, it's forward compatible and backward compatible.
Gotcha. So, I mean, you started talking about new features, and I think the string ID is something, more and more graphs are sort of adopting the ability to set your own identifier. I kind of lump that in with the group of things that are about like just general ease of use when it comes to using graphs, using JanusGraph. I mean, JanusGraph is it's really not like necessarily. I mean, no graph is really easy to just jump into, but JanusGraph has its own sort of complexities because of all the and we really, I'm assuming a lot of people know what JanusGraph, how JanusGraph works. It has a lot of different backends that it can store your graph in. So you kind of have to also know something about the backends that you're working with in order to be, really successful with it. In releasing 1.0 or even, earlier versions, what kind of ease of use improvements have you kind of seen since earlier versions of JanusGraph, since maybe the earliest versions of JanusGraph released? Has been much focus been put in that area?
Well, I don't know. We weren't focusing on ease of use as for now. We are focusing more like optimizations and different features. But I would say we did improve like documentation and fixed a lot of stuff in the documentation. So I think it might help people, and we always try to be up to date with documentation and describe as much stuff as possible there. So I would say there is like an advanced step in documentation, and I don't know, beginner users, I think they just don't need to click there because it is like technical heavy stuff there. But generally, I think if they follow the intro in documentation, it's pretty easy to start using it and just play with JanusGraph, because we do provide also Docker for JanusGraph, so you can just start JanusGraph with one line. Pretty easy.
I think what you said there is kind of key too, is that you start with a certain path in JanusGraph. Like, I think too often folks come with, maybe not a lot of experience with graphs, or not a lot of experience with, Gremlin, not a lot of experience with whatever backend they're using, and they start there, like right at the crisscross of all those different things, and it can make it harder. It can make it feel really hard, but it is something that is working for a lot of people. I'd encourage folks to not give up too quickly, and maybe look at things in smaller chunks to try to work your way through things.
And I believe you said it correctly that with JanusGraph it is slightly harder than with other graph databases to start with, because you do need to understand the underlying storage backend you are going to use, and also like in mixed index backend, aka full stack storage backend, like Elasticsearch or whatever. So those are mostly for more technical people, but that's actually the main reason JanusGraph exists. I would say that the main purpose of JanusGraph is to generalize the interface for different storage implementations, but also make this interface as much extensible as possible, so that those storage implementation people who implement storage adapters for JanusGraph can reuse their special optimization techniques as much as possible. And so this is like the main kind of purpose, I believe, of JanusGraph, because there are a ton of graph databases out there, and many of them are doing kind of similar stuff, sometimes just the same stuff, and developers of those databases sometimes just do the same job over and over again, the same like optimizations, the same storage layers implementations, and so on. And so with JanusGraph, it's just the idea that let's build something like a framework. Let's say it's actually kind of similar what TinkerPop is doing. We want to generalize. TinkerPop wants to generalize like the interface. Yes, there are a lot of graph databases. Yes, they have different optimizations, consistency, and so on, and they can be used for different purposes. But generally, with TinkerPop, we just generalize how it is used and how to implement your graph database. And the same for JanusGraph, but on another layer. On another layer, I believe, is on the storage layer. How do we store stuff? Because essentially, we just store these bytes like 0 and 1s on a disk or in RAM or whatever you are using, and that's it. And so it's just how do we store this? And this is what JanusGraph wants to solve. But JanusGraph doesn't care what exact database are you going to use.
Could you say something about the current backends that you're supporting right now with JanusGraph?
Yeah, so like officially in the JanusGraph, if you don't use any adapters, we do support Cassandra and Cassandra compatible databases like ScyllaDB, AstraDB, or any other SQL compatible.
Amazon Keyspace.
Amazon Keyspace, right. And then HBase, BerkeleyDB, and in-memory Graph database. Did I miss something? I think
Is Scylla in the mix? Did you say that already?
Yeah. I said Scylla.
Okay.
So those are like officially supported by the community, but it doesn't mean it's only those databases. There are other databases. Let me actually check. We did have
someone
adapters.
has Aerospike DB.
Right, DynamoDB, FoundationDB. Those are third-party adapters. Yes, they are. Actually, FoundationDB is supported by JanusGraph right now, but it is it's still like an adapter.
I think the support for CouchDB is on its way. We have a active pull request from the CouchDB contributors.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
And then for full text storage, we do support Elasticsearch, Solar, Lucene, for basically for mixed indexes. But again, you can implement additional. If it is not enough, you can just implement something for your storage, and that's it. So it's the main trends, I believe.
Sticking with this theme of just kind of ease of use, I think one of the areas I think people stumble a lot with, again, just with graphs in general, not particularly JanusGraph by any means, is bulk loading. What is the current pattern for bulk loading with JanusGraph these days? What's the right way to do that to get a lot of data into JanusGraph as fast as possible?
Good question. We do support, actually, there is a feature in JanusGraph called bulk loading. And if you do enable it, it will just skip a different
consistency checks and schema constraints.
All these checks, and will just pour all this data into your storage, and that's it.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So basically, you can use that. I don't know. Like, I think this is the main way how you do this. You just bulk load all this data, and then you enable all these consistency checks for your other transactions, and just work normally.
So that's a switch users can turn on if they want to ingest their data faster, but still doing that in a OLTP way. And I've seen some customers using Spark. They write Spark application by themselves, which just does a bunch of executors, and each executor creates a separate JanusGraph transaction and dumps the data via the transaction. So I would say that would be like OLAP, but JanusGraph natively doesn't support like an OLAP way to ingest your data as soon as possible. You either do it via Hadoop ecosystem or using Spark.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think it's just a kind of a common blocker point for folks when they're getting started, and the easier that part is, usually the easier it is for them to get going. But I think that also goes back to the point of starting with a smaller chunk. If you are starting with graphs, if you are starting with JanusGraph, start with a smaller subset of your data and get comfortable with dealing with that before you go try to load a petabyte of data into JanusGraph. or into any graph for that matter. I think,
Yeah.
I think that's still something we're all sort of struggling with a little bit to figure out exactly, the nicest way for all that for you to get your data in quickly and easily. I mean, I do think there are things out there that are helpful and work pretty well. But if it sounds like for JanusGraph, it's still sort of a design your best, design your best bulk loading capability kind of yourself. You kind of bring your own approach to parallelism and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, but I do believe we can, if there are like enough interest in this bulk loading feature, I do believe we can just generalize it a little bit and make some bulk loading, like generic, I would say, bulk loading jobs in JanusGraph, so that it's easier for people to get started. I don't know. I just haven't seen too much interest there, but yeah, if community is interested, we can think about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me see what would you say the plans are for the next major release?
Yeah, actually, I did have quite several, not all, but something of what is interested, what I'm interested, basically. First, I think actually Bo may talk about it more. It's index selection algorithm, the Florian. I think I'm very bad with pronunciations. I think Florian Griskamp, or so he did start working on better index selection algorithm. Basically, I would say that currently how indexes are selected may
dumb.
confuse some people. It's not dumb, but there are some problems with it. For example, if you have several indexes covering parts of your query, you may find out that you have this how do we call it, query indexes intersection query or whatever, when basically you query multiple indexes and then in memory you just filter data from those multiple indexes. And sometimes it could be actually quite bad on the performance and quite expensive in computation. And sometimes it's much better to just select one. Not sometimes, it's always much better to select just one most precise index and filter it all other steps in memory. But yeah, as JanusGraph currently don't know about precision, or we call it selectivity, of those indexes, then we just pull data from all the indexes at this point. But there is really good work, which will improve it. I think Bo can.
I can elaborate on that. I think I like most, if not all, graph databases, and like most databases, JanusGraph doesn't have a cost-based optimizer. So, like Alex just mentioned, when you want to start from a vertex, you may have multiple indices covering your predicates. JanusGraph does some hard-coded heuristics to select the best index to find that vertex, but it's not always the best choice because we don't have histograms, we don't have statistics, we don't know about your index, we don't know the selectivity of the index, we don't know how skewed it is, we don't know the distribution of your data. So it's not perfect. And Florian has an open PR, which he wants to introduce a prototype of cost-based optimizer. He wants to do something more, do index selection more intelligently. And it's beyond index selection, right? when you want to traverse from one vertex to, when you want to find a path between A and B, you can either start the search from A, or you can start the search from B. Nowadays, there's no way for JanusGraph to tell which one would be cheaper. But you can imagine it's something that might be achievable in the future if we have enough statistics and a cost-based optimizer. I just learned that even Cassandra doesn't have a cost-based optimizer, and this is one of their future enhancement proposals. One of the very recent enhancement proposals. It was created in 2023. But I don't see that going into Cassandra in the very near future. But I think what Florian started is a very good starting point. It would solve some of the problems we have. It would not solve all the problems, but it's a very good starting point. But
so with that pull request, I guess, is it? I was going to ask about like how much backend support you needed for this in order for it to be a feature in JanusGraph. It sounds like you don't necessarily need the backend support in order to implement something in JanusGraph that allows for the cost-based index selection.
Right.
Yeah, it just how do we select? How do we determine this selectivity of the index? And basically, I believe that we definitely need to allow users provide this data by themselves. Maybe they know better than if JanusGraph by default, let's say there will be, I believe, some selectivity strategies, and maybe like histograms is just one, like the first one which will be there, but sometimes users know better than like JanusGraph can analyze, and they can say, let's say, this index, like for this query, has higher selectivity than other indexes. In such case, JanusGraph will know that, okay, I better choose this index over that index, or it's already actually in the PR, some part of it, or maybe I will choose like multiple indexes because like their combination of selectivity is better than this one very generic index. So yeah, it's just how do we define this selectivity? And yeah, as I said, I strongly believe that we need to allow people just provide this selectivity by either by configuration or like per query or whatever, or maybe like both, like via configuration, which will be like a default selectivity, and then you can like adjust per query this selectivity, and of course like have different strategies which you can apply, like these histograms to calculate selectivity of your indexes. Again, if user wants to do this. So yeah.
Yeah, so in the first stage, JanusGraph is not going to storing histograms in the storage layer. And so what we're having right now is we allow users to provide optimizer hints when they're writing their queries. They can provide a hint saying, oh, this index is very selective, something like that. And also in JanusGraph schema, there's one thing called, there's this one type of index that's called unique index. So if you're using that index, we know you don't have duplicate data. We know we know that index is probably better than the others, so we will prefer that index to the others, given that we don't have any other information provided by the user, or we don't have histogram stored. I think in the future, if we ever decide to build histograms and metadata, and we want to store it in the backend, we would not require any special things from the storage. That's a philosophy of JanusGraph. We might we would store the metadata aside from your major data, and without any user interference, and you don't have to know what's happening under the hood, and there won't be special requirements from the storage. That's my belief.
Okay, cool. Any other neat things you might be considering for the next major release?
Yeah, well, we started improving storage layer for ScyllaDB. At this point, basically, there are right now for CQL, there are right now two drivers available. The first is the default driver called CQL, and currently you are using it with any SQL compatible database, including ScyllaDB. But if you know that ScyllaDB has its own fork of DataStax Cassandra driver, and they have ScyllaDB Java driver. And it has some pretty cool features, which if you are using that driver, it knows about shards. Basically, it has the concept of shards. It understands concepts of shards, that driver. And it can route your request not only to correct pods, not only to correct servers, but also to correct processor, directly to correct processor. Let's say if you have like 16 core processor units, right? Then ScyllaDB by default, it utilizes as much resources as possible, and it will utilize all those 16 processor units for each separate shard. So there will be one server, 16 shards, and each shard is responsible to serving only its part of the data, and that's it. And the default SQL driver doesn't have this knowledge and cannot route your request to proper shard. It only can route to a single default 9042 port. That's it. Nothing else. Yeah, it can determine based on a token map of your partition keys. It can determine like the proper server, but yeah, that's the best it can do. With shards, yeah, it will. There will be several ports opened, not a single port, but several ports opened, and each port will serve its own shard, and JanusGraph will basically route your request to proper shard. But for that, we need to use a ScyllaDB driver. At this moment, you can do this, but it's not easy because you need to compile JanusGraph yourself with a specific flag. You pass Scylla something, I think Scylla enabled or something like this. And if you pass this flag, it will compile your JanusGraph with Scylla driver instead of DataStax driver. And your basically JanusGraph will be much more efficient if you do this. But we don't currently provide like in a Docker, which we have, or in release artifacts which we publish, we don't have it. So basically, you cannot enable Scylla driver in either Docker or release artifacts which you download from official website. But you, again, as I said, you can build it with those drivers enabled, and it will be much more efficient. So one of the obvious feature requests which we want to implement for the next release is just add specific. We believe it should be like environment variable And just if you pass this environment variable to JanusGraph server, then it will understand that, okay, I need to use not the generic drivers, but specific drivers for Scila. So basically, we will pass like SQL type, let's say Scila, right? And if your SQL type equals Scila, then we'll enable better drivers for your storage instead of using generic. So I believe, yeah, we'll do this for the next release. It's not hard, but it's something which lacks right now, and users might really benefit from it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It looks like we had a question come on Twitch. Why don't we address that one in the midst of things? Compared to many other graph databases, JanusGraph has several advantages: scalability, broad support for various storage backends, schema constraints. In your opinion, which feature is the most important to users when choosing JanusGraph?
Yes, I believe, as I said previously, it's my belief. I don't know for sure, but I believe it's that pluggable storage backends for JanusGraph is pretty cool. Even we are plugging right now at Mapped, we use JanusGraph, and we changed like several storage backends, and it is pretty cool that when you are not logged in with one storage provider, and you can use different storage implementations for your, but you don't change a piece of code in your logic. You don't change anything. So all you change is just, okay, I don't want to use this storage implementation. I will use this one. That's it. So it is pretty convenient, I would say. But yeah, I believe different users might have different views and different values when they choose graph databases. And the second, I would say, is scalability of JanusGraph. Again, JanusGraph depends on the scalability of the storage backend, which is used with JanusGraph. But if you use, for example, Cassandra is pretty scalable. It do supports like Geo replications. You can have multiple data centers which interact with each other. You can like configure that, okay, these JanusGraph instances will prefer local data center and not like remote data center. But these JanusGraph instances, they will distribute queries like randomly or whatever. So there are a lot of features regarding scalability. I think the fact that you can scale your data for pretty big clusters, huge, enormous, like Geo for the whole world, Geo distributed clusters, this is something that many big organizations are looking for. Maybe it's not that valuable for smaller companies, which need like several servers and that's it. But yeah, for big organizations, when they have like distributed clusters across the globe, then yeah, it's pretty neat feature, I would say. But again, different users, I think, will have different values. But
Yeah, based on my experience, small companies and individual users versus large companies have different reasons for choosing JanusGraph. For smaller companies and individual users, vendor locking is a problem. With JanusGraph, you can easily switch your storage backends, and also you can run JanusGraph on-premise or on any other cloud. And as JanusGraph is part of the TinkerPop ecosystem, it means if you're writing, when you write your application code, you're just writing graph database agnostic code. You're just writing Gremlin code. Today you're using JanusGraph. If you want to switch to, say, a managed service by Amazon Neptune, you just need to migrate your data, but you barely need to change your application code because you're still writing Gremlin queries. As So the richer the TinkerPop ecosystem is, I believe there's a stronger motivation for small users to choose one of the graph databases under the TinkerPop ecosystem, not just JanusGraph. And for larger customers, and I've spoken to some larger companies, and one important reason for them to choose JanusGraph is because it's open sourced. Not just because its code is open sourced, but also because of its license. JanusGraph uses Apache 2.0 license, which means those bigger companies can easily fork it and make their own changes on top of it. And at the same time, they don't have to worry about legal issues or compliance issues, because you don't have to open source. They don't have to open source their code because they're commercializing it or because they're using it in a way that some other stricter licenses like Elasticsearch, MongoDB, the licenses they use don't. Correct me if I am wrong. Maybe this were already old news. But if you're using the source code, and you have to open source your source code as well, or you can use the source code, but you cannot commercialize your product. With JanusGraph, you can fork it and name it your own graph and sell it. You can fork it and use it in your company. And for the large companies, their scale is so large that the cost of any other non-free graph databases would be too high for them. So they'd rather choose JanusGraph, which is completely free and open sourced.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Let's see. Maybe keeping with the topic of people who are using JanusGraph. I assume both of you have used JanusGraph in your work at some point. I don't know. Is there anything interesting you can share about things that you've worked on with JanusGraph?
Yeah. So currently at Mapped, we are using a JanusGraph actually to basically to store a hierarchy of places, things, and points for Internet of Things data. But we use our graph as identity graph. If you know that about identity graphs is when the same entity may have different different connectors may know the same entity by different identifiers. For example, you have a building, and at Mapped we work with buildings, and a building may have like different identifiers. Let's say one of them is address, right? Normal address which we are using. Another one could be like geodata. On a map, you have latitude, longitude, and you can define like your point on a map. Someone may know this building because of like phone number or whatever, or generally by name or something else. And even so, different entities know about this building differently. They refer to this building differently. It's still the same building. And so basically at Mapped, one like part of our job is to help customers sort data from different connectors and structure it into basically a resolved graph, which is easy to read, easy to use in your API. Basically how we do this, we get all this data from different connectors, we store it in the identity graph, and then we have machine learning which labels your data and learns all the time about your data, and it connects and basically changes the graph all the time, and we resolve this dynamic graph into a simplified version of your graph, which you can then read and understand better about your data. And basically, it's like a brain. We basically use graph like a brain for AI, kind of like this. So that's how we use it. Yeah, mapped. Yeah.
Are you allowed to say how large your graph is, like number of edges, just something general?
I don't know if I'm allowed.
Okay, I won't press you then.
So yeah, I need to.
Yeah,
sorry,
I'm always
I
curious
check,
what.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm always curious what the largest graphs are
I can
JanusGraph
only say that we have some big customers coming in, and they have a lot of data. That's all I can say.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
We'll just assume that means like kabillions. How's that?
Yeah, maybe. I don't
know. We did get another question from this one from Discord, and it comes from Yang, as you know, is a contributor to TinkerPop. She wanted to know, what questions, one question from a maintainer point of view, when JanusGraph integrates TinkerPop upgrades, do you have, what are the problems? What kind of pain points do you run into? Could anything be easier? I'm adding a few things, but what would make things easier to consume TinkerPop?
Good question. Like with updates, I guess the only problem we had, maybe not the only problem, but one of problems we have right now is that we didn't actually implement some of the steps, some of the newer steps that Gremlin provides. For example, merge V, merge E. We didn't implement it yet, so you can't use it with JanusGraph. But I don't know how can you like make it easier. It's just we were lazy and we say.
I presume it works though, right? Like the TinkerPop implementation works though, doesn't it? Like it works. It's not optimized. I would just guess.
Probably. I really didn't actually use those steps. So, yeah, I don't know.
I think TinkerPop has a test suite that tests all of those steps using the
For some reason,
backends,
I do remember. For some reason, I think we did disable some of them.
Yeah, we disabled some of the tests.
But I don't remember.
I don't remember it either.
I don't know. I think JanusGraph might have one of the easier times consuming TinkerPop stuff. I don't know why I think that. I just of all the graphs I've worked on, I got a feeling JanusGraph probably has like one of the easier times. But
JanusGraph, we actually disabled 2 tests for merge V tests. So this merge V, X label, person name, something like this. But I don't know. As I said, I didn't test that specific step, so
okay.
Not sure.
Yeah, it's a neat step. It definitely simplifies the process. And sorry, my dog makes an obligatory check-in whenever I'm on stream. I don't know why. She never comes in here otherwise. Comes in.
Okay.
We can't hear you.
I think, your mic is off, I believe. But it is cute. It is
the
super
dog
cute.
is really bad. Hang on a second. All right, come on, sit down. There you go.
She's cute.
Ridiculous. Technical difficulties. All right. Yeah, she got all tangled up in the wires and stuff. That was comedy. I don't know why she comes in here, but almost every time I'm on, like, rarely for a call, but more for like just like anything that involves like a camera and like Discord, and
She
like
wants
steps
some
in.
attention.
Yeah, I don't know if
Yeah.
she hears the voices and like she hears me talking and is like, all right, like, I gotta see what's going on. So,
Just double check.
but yeah, I think the consumption shouldn't be too hard for most for most graphs, especially ones that kind of adhere pretty tightly to what the kind of the TinkerPop framework and how it works. I do think merge V and merge E would be cool if you could get those working and optimized. I think it would help tremendously for users who are again trying to do. It simplifies like a really it simplifies sort of a complex pattern for doing get or create style operations, which is a pretty common thing. So it'd be cool if that was working for JanusGraph.
Yeah, we can. Yeah, again, if there is interest in it, yeah, we definitely will implement it. Probably we can optimize it as well. But yeah, just need to check it. And
Okay.
while we are on this topic, I think some of the features, but it's like kind of hard features and probably long-awaited features. One of them is the repeat step works currently only in breadth first search mode by default in TinkerPop, and it would be really great if we have this depth first search mode available in TinkerPop. I have seen actually at Amazon Neptune that you have three modes, I believe, like depth first search, breadth first search, and then about batched depth first search mode. Currently at JanusGraph we have basically you can say it's like two modes. First is general breadth first search, and another one is batched breadth first search mode. But we don't have currently depth first search mode, and we wonder. I guess we can implement just another step, which will act like a repeat step, and it will work in depth first search mode. But I wonder whether we needed to do this like on a graph, by our own on a graph site, or is it something which suits better on like a TinkerPop?
Yeah, that really should be unified better. TinkerPop technically, I guess that repeat step is technically like I don't know. It acts in sort of a mixed mode in a sense because of those barrier steps that get injected, the lazy barrier strategy. We did at least unify stuff so that I guess if you don't add any barriers, then it should go DFS. But yeah, I don't know that that's like fully done, but we at least got it so that there's only one strategy that adds barriers now. They used to be injected with all kinds of from lots of different strategies. So technically, if you never want barriers installed, you can remove lazy barrier strategy, and then you don't have that breadth first activity going on, or mixed activity sort of going on. I do think that the Neptune functionality, that configuration that turns that on and off, is something that should probably be like a standard syntax in Gremlin.
Yeah, because it seems that if we do it, there will be like these modes available in JanusGraph, Neptune. But I was just wondering if I imagine that probably all the graph databases would want this functionality.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm not sure who's going to jump in and kind of drive it along, but I've always thought that that's like kind of it should be probably it should be a syntax that's like built into Gremlin itself, probably along the lines of what Neptune did. You just do g.with and include some syntax to say, I want it to run this way. I don't know that it needs to be like step based, where you have to have one part of the traversal working one way and another part working another. I think it's probably something like at a traversal level that you would configure it to say, I want this thing to work depth first or breadth first, or like the standard sort of mixed mode that exists. So yeah, I think that would be worth doing.
Yeah, and one of the other features, I'm not sure if it was like spending too much time right now talking about it, but just asynchronous queries execution at TinkerPop. There is already quite a bit of a discussion available in the mailing list. I started it a while ago, but yeah, just me. I was too lazy to thinking about it and probably structuring. I do understand that at some point, TinkerPop has to become asynchronous. In JanusGraph right now, before version 1.0, we didn't much care about it. But right now, we did some pretty cool improvements in JanusGraph 1.0, and I believe right now we are at the point where we are kind of close to be able to, how to say it? I just don't know. Basically, we are close to be able to execute queries asynchronously if TinkerPop had this ability. But TinkerPop doesn't, and so I think we just need to spend more time and drafting some POC for TinkerPop. But yeah, it's just some random thoughts in my head. But yeah,
I think that's interesting.
Yeah.
We'll see. We'll see where that goes. I mean, I think you all are familiar with how the TinkerPop sort of development process works. Maybe you could talk a little bit about how the how it works in JanusGraph. What's community governance look like there? What's it take to become an official committer? Things like that.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So first of all, JanusGraph is not driven by a single company. It's not sponsored by any companies. So it's pretty much like community driven. And I think most, if not all, contributors are active users of JanusGraph. During the daily usage, they find this flaw or that bug or some feature that is missing. They implement it. And as I just said, JanusGraph is open source, and you can modify the source code whatever you want. And some of them feel like, oh, I should contribute this back to the community so that my own fork doesn't diverge from JanusGraph, and also more people can be using my feature. I can do something for the community. So they then come back and contribute back to the community. And some of them just stay longer in the community. They contribute more often. And at some point of time, the technical steering committee will start a vote and decide whether we should invite someone to be a committer. And then after a while, we might or may not have another vote that says, oh, should we promote some committer to the technical steering committee? That's basically how the process works. But we don't have a hard criteria for committer promotion or technical steering committee promotion. It's it's a little bit subjective, but it is what it is.
Yeah, it's true. I don't know how to like make proper rules for people to invite as a contributor or STSC member. For example, we did have like Bo he contributed a lot of features, and like it was obvious, well, he needs to become committer and then technical steering committee, because, well, I mean, he does a lot of job there. But we did also had like other cases where, for example, person didn't commit anything, but he created a big pull request. It was with in-memory graph database, and it was obvious that he's the one who like understands it at the most, and he's the one who most likely will handle it, and then it makes sense for him to become a contributor, to become a committer at the JanusGraph, and so we invited him as well. So we don't have this kind of rule to like you need to contribute like 10 commits and then you become a contributor. We just I don't know, it's purely
it doesn't work very well when you make those you just try and come up with some numbers. There's just tends to be from the time I spent on like TinkerPop's PMC, bringing in new committers and things, there was never any particular thing that pushed it over. Someone just recognized that somebody was doing a lot of work. I mean, sometimes it was just this person is like committed so much stuff, like I'm tired of merging their pull requests. Like they should just be merging their own stuff. Like, why am I doing all this work? So sometimes it could end up as being something like that, I suppose. But yeah, I kind of know what you mean. But it sounds like you have a governance pretty similar to like Apache communities, I suppose.
Pretty similar.
Not a PMC, but what do you call it?
TS technical
steering
committee.
Yeah, so kind of a similar sort of setup.
We basically replicate the kind of the governance.
Yeah.
From TinkerPop, we also have this requirement to. Currently, we have like a requirement to have 2 votes on a pull request from any 2 committers. Yeah, or at least 1 vote and 7 days of grace period. And if there is no any reaction. And by the way, if you are a contributor, a committer, and you open a pull request, and for example, now no one reviews, you can consider yourself as a vote plus. And so you can basically, after 7 days, you can merge your own pull request by yourself if you want to do those.
Okay, good. Yeah, it does sound pretty similar. I think all that stuff works pretty well for the most part. I think the 7-day waiting period is like plenty of time for people to, if somebody does have a problem with something you've done, 7 days is probably not enough to hear about it. And if you didn't get, I think it also encourages people to pay attention to what's happening in the community, or else, you gotta get out of the way and just let the work happen, I guess, to a certain degree. Okay, cool. I think that's about all the questions I had, and we've been at it for about an hour. I think that was just a really nice discussion. Thank you both so much for joining today, and got a couple questions answered. So I think it's a good talk. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting.
Yeah. And thanks everybody who was watching. We'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.